Hi, welcome to Electrox. We have a very different interview today. It's not a band, it's not a sort of, well, promoter, but technically it is a promoter. We are interviewing Satan Not Hating. So I've obviously had a bit of a delve into your website and what the campaign's all about. But as people listening won't have done any of that, can you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what Satan Not Hating is?
Yeah, happy to. My name's Laraje. I'm a member of the Global Order of Satan, the UK order. We're an atheistic, non-theistic, satanic organisation, and one of the many campaigns that we do is the Satan Not Hating campaign. The campaign started in 2000, and then almost immediately stopped because of you know what. Um, Thanks to COVID, basically. But the campaign itself is primarily set up to counter uh, right-wing extremism and hate within the kind of like alt music spheres. I know it's a bit of a cliche that Satanists must like metal and industrial music or goth music or whatever. Um, and there is an element of truth to that. A lot of us do. Uh, but we'd come to notice that there was a disturbing increase in the amount of homophobia, racism, transphobia, and just general right wing nastiness. When we'd been to gigs or we'd heard stories about certain artists, and we just wanted a way to counter that. And we also noticed that a lot of these particular bands, especially in the kind of like the more problematic scenes like black metal, were kind of co-opting satanic symbols. So we really wanted a way to sort of fight back against that. And
Yeah.
like I say, we had to kind of like stop almost immediately after launch because COVID intervened and the whole world stopped. Um, but we picked it up again a few months ago, and we've now got over 180 participants. Excuse me, 180 participants, the majority of which are artists and bands. But we've also got a few record labels, a promoter, and a few music collectives, such as the Anti-Fascist Black Metal Network and organisations like that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you've raised quite a few points there, and I'm definitely going to come back to
Mm,
things like, say, the fascism and like the
mm,
symbolism that you kind of see.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, 2020, yeah, obviously horrible COVID, and then
Yes.
I can understand why it was put on
Yeah.
the back foot for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Um, but you mentioned 180 participants. Is that what you've just
Mm.
achieved in the last few months?
Yeah, we relaunched in June, and initially it was just UK. Um, and then we thought, well, why don't we sort of like throw it open to our other orders and see if they want to participate? And Sweden did, and our two US orders, Seattle and Pittsburgh, both did as well. So there's the four of us now. And yeah, since June, we've now got over 180 participants.
Wow, that is really impressive to get that many people on board so soon. See, doing a pretty similar thing to what you do with see, bands and organizations and stuff. I know how hard it can be, so that's
Mm.
really impressive. Shows that there's a good community you must have there, like coming together so fast.
I think what it shows is that there is an audience out there, and there is an appetite within musicians themselves to sort of distance themselves from the sort of like hateful bullshit that can occur. We were always thought that there was, um, but it's been nice to have that confirmed. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So, and like I say, I'll come back to quite a few of the things you've mentioned there, but
Mm,
again, for the people who haven't really learnt or had much exposure to things like the global order of Satan. I
mm,
mean, obviously, for a lot of people, you they see a picture of Baphomet or they see
mm.
something like a global order of Satan, and it does bring a fair level of anxiety to them.
Yeah.
Understandably so for some people, but obviously for those of us who know what it actually means,
mm,
and sort of the morality behind it all. Could you
mm.
just explain to people who maybe don't understand or they see it as a Satanism? Could you just clarify a bit more what the global order of Satan is, what its
Yes.
principles are?
Yeah. I'll give you a potted history of modern Satanism. So, modern Satanism really started with Anton LaVey, Satanic Bible, Church of Satan, all that kind of stuff. Um, but we kind of are not like that at all. That it's fairly well for the first thing, it's very American centric. Secondly, and probably more important, it's fairly reactionary. LaVey built his Church of Satan on the works of Ayn Rand, who was an American economic philosopher, and also a very kind of pseudo-fascist book called Might is Right. And he used a lot of when he lifted whole sections to create the Satanic Bible. So the only thing we have in common with LaVey and Satanism is the fact that it's non-theistic, atheistic Satanism. So we don't believe in God, we don't believe in the devil, we don't believe in ghosts, we don't believe in fairies or horoscopes or any of that crap. Um, what we take from Satanism is more like romantic Satanism. And that was kind of like a literary movement based on John Milton's Paradise Lost,
Yes.
and then further expounded upon by people like Shelley and Mary Wollstonecraft and Byron and William Blake, and they kind of like took the rebellious aspects of Milton's Satan and sort of expanded it into kind of like a school of thought and a school of literary thought about opposition and defiance and being an adversary. And that's kind of the Satanism that we adhere to. And it's much more community and society focused than LaVeyan Satanism. Um, we do, put ourselves as important individuals, but we also put that within a societal context. So we are part of society, um, and we want to live in a society that is good and kind and supportive of each other, because you know that's just a good way to be. We think.
Yeah.
Um, so our main principles revolve around consent, autonomy on a personal level, and science, reason. We have basically what we call our six pillars. Um, they're on our website, globalordersatan.com, for people who want to have a look. But yes, they basically revolve around the idea of personal autonomy and responsibility, science reason, and forgiveness of mistakes, that kind of thing, really.
Yeah. It is a good moralistic framework for
Hmm.
pretty much anyone of any culture, creed, or religion can appreciate,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
suppose.
I think people think because we're Satanists, we are against other religions. That's not necessarily the case. I don't really care if someone's a Christian, a Muslim, a Buddhist, whatever. They do what they want to do, and Satanism is a religion. So we're not against religion. Um, the only time we start to have an issue with it is when it starts to become enshrined in laws, or, you have things like 26 Church of England bishops appointed to the House of Lords on no
Yes.
basis other than the fact that they're Christians, or it starts to affect how education is practiced in schools, that kind of thing. If people want to worship Jesus or God or Buddha or Muhammad, have at it, that's fine.
Yeah. And I think 2 points here I'd like to raise where you've mentioned, see, Milton's Paradise Lost. I think
Mm,
in this day and age, something like the global order of Satan just makes sense because when you have, and I didn't want to get political here, but where you have people like, say, Corbyn, who just wants obviously the best for people,
mm,
or you have
mm,
like his name, Bernie Sanders, and you have all of these
mm,
like, you have these political figures that come up and say, hey, what if we just what if we made the world better and then
For people. Yeah,
yeah, and then
exactly.
of
Yeah.
course everything is thrown against them to paint them as like evil. And I suppose the same
Mm.
with Lucifer, wasn't it? He was like, hey, maybe we shouldn't enslave people. And then he was
Well,
painted to
yeah,
be the worst one ever. So
right. Yeah. So, I mean, that was the basis of Milton's Lucifer, was that God said, "Ah, so I've created this new being. I'm going to call it man, and you guys, you angels, all got to worship it now." And everyone, all the angels said, "Yeah, okay," apart from Satan, who said, "What? Why? Why have I got to do that?" Uh, so, it's kind of, why can't we just be equal? Why does one person have to worship another? And it's kind of that basis of no one person is better than the other. If we all just tried to sort of like coexist and respect each other's opinions and beliefs, without dissolving into kind of like my God's better than your God's kind of thing, the world might be end up being a better place.
exactly so. And before I move back into the actual campaign part of the questions,
Mm,
the other thing that really, as I was looking into your website and having a read through, the thing that really impressed me was the work that you do with the LGBTQIA plus community.
mm,
Because as readers on my website will see on every single review, whatever I do, a blog post, every website page I make has where I support a trans charity and I support a cancer charity. And
mm.
I think there has sometimes been a band I've got along with really well, and they've been very much like, oh, I'll share it when it's done, and like I love it. And then there's no explanation as to why they don't share it. And I feel like it might be because their name has now been put next to a charity like that. So
Maybe.
things can be quite subtle, I think, for some
Mm,
people in that case. But I see that the order of global order have put up things like where they've helped trans kids or
mm.
LGBT people get housing, get funding towards like the treatment they need, like the affirming
Yep.
surgery, whatever it is. So how does the order go about sort of doing that charity work? Because as a non-organized, non-profit organization, I'd imagine that's pretty much part of it. You're just forwarding funds that come away, but how do you sort of decide where and when and how?
Well, as I said earlier, we're all about autonomy and consent. So, in order to qualify for something like a grant for, I don't know, something like transitioning, costs towards transitioning, um, we would uh, insist that that person was a member of the order,
Yeah,
and that's not to say that's not kind of like a recruitment tool. It's not saying come and be a member and we will give you this, that, and the other. It's to ensure that we know who they are and it's genuinely what they want, that kind of thing.
yeah,
It's just to sort of make sure that everybody knows exactly what's going on. But in terms of actually raising money for things like that, we we don't have a huge turnover at all. Most of our money, well, in fact, just about all of our money, is raised via merch sales on our website, or we go to a number of alternative markets, particularly the Satanic Flea Market in London, which runs 4 times a year. So that's where we get most of our money. If you're in London, pop in and say hi. It's in Islington 4 times a year. um, and yeah, what we do with that money is we do things like you've mentioned. We award grants to people who might want to medically transition, and other things as well. One of our other campaigns is our Bloody Hell campaign, and that is providing free period products to I think places like food banks throughout the UK. Um, our Seattle order has a drug campaign going on at the moment where they kind of like provide clean needles and stuff like that. Our Pittsburgh order have what they call their Baphomet Bags campaign, um, and that's where they provide things like um, cheap, recyclable, and lightweight goods for their unhoused neighbours. Things like cutlery, sleeping bags, tents, that kind of thing.
oh, nice.
Um, So yeah, and the other thing I should explain at this point is that each order is completely autonomous. So it's not a case of each order has a set of rigid rules that they have to follow. Each order does things entirely on its own. And sometimes, like the Satan Not Hatin campaign, we come together to do something.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it already shows from what's on the website and what you've said there. So it's yeah, it's really nice
Mm,
to see and changing people's hearts and minds, as they say, right? But
absolutely.
so it is quite interesting that I sort of was made aware of the campaign going on because a friend of mine, I have like a wall full of
Mm.
photos of my friends because I have a terrible memory. Um, but one of them, I haven't seen her in a couple of years actually, but she's wearing a Global Order of Satan flag with the rainbow colors, sort of like a,
Fantastic.
and she's like spread it out in Victoria train station. It's like right there next to my computer. So when a friend of
Right.
mine tagged me in your campaign asking for people to interview and stuff, I was like, oh, well, I've heard of you, but that
Those guys.
and I've seen that picture next to me for years, but I actually know anything about you. So it's actually good to hear everything about the order itself.
Yeah, yeah. I think you know, people hear the word Satan and they think, "Oh, Jesus, these people must be terrifying," and I don't think we are. We just kind of like believe a certain thing. That's all.
Yeah, exactly. See, we've covered pretty much the Order of Satan side of that, and I think that would probably give everyone the answers they need to alleviate any anxiety or prejudices that they might have had. Um,
Yeah, no, I promise you, we're not sacrificing babies to Satan because mainly because we don't believe in Satan.
yes, I think a lot of people watch the Netflix documentary about the Church of Satan and then they have very
Yeah,
confused thoughts. But as with anything on Netflix,
yeah.
it's never quite what it seems, is it?
Nope, nope.
Okay. So in terms of the music then and the actual Not Hating
Mm,
campaign, how
mm.
would you say that you differ from other websites or um, sort of people like me in just the music industry who try to see promote bands? Do you say there's anything
Mm.
like unique with you or anything specific that you're trying to do that you don't see anywhere else?
I think the main thing that we wanted to make sure it was consensual. So there are in existence quite a few kind of like lists of um, quote unquote safe bands, i.e., bands that are non-problematic from certain scenes, like the black metal scene, and that's fine. Those things are great. But what we wanted to make sure when we did ours was to make sure that it was consensual. So we approached the artists first and said, hey, we're running this campaign. Do you want to be part of it? And then they either said yes, no, or whatever. Um, and so, because as I said earlier, consent and autonomy are built into our pillars, that was very important to us. So, every participant that you see on our website is a willing participant. They've not just been added to a list. Um, we've approached them first. The other thing we wanted to make sure was that they were fully aware of who we were. Um, and we have had some replies saying, "Guys, I totally support the aims of the campaign, but I don't feel I can associate my particular project with Satanism," and that's absolutely fair enough. You know,
Yeah,
Satan, it's not for everybody, and we can't blame anybody for that. That's absolutely no problem at all.
yeah, yeah, makes perfect sense. Again, it comes down to that. Oh, that word can be very sort of like
Yeah.
stigmatized, can't it? So
Well, it can. I mean, you know, we do have to be honest and realize that not everybody has a positive view of Satanism. And like you've alluded to, that's mainly because people aren't really sure what it is, and there's a lot of people think of, oh my God, horror movies, Dennis Wheatley novels, that kind of thing. They don't really think of modern Satanism.
yeah, exactly. So I mean, it comes back to the point where I was saying, like, where the image of Baphomet gets people. Like, I always find
Right.
it funny if I go into an alternative store with a friend who's maybe not as alternative, and they point at a Baphomet such and go, "Oh, the devil," and I'm like, "Not,
Nope.
not really." But yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And then you have a 10-hour conversation about what Baphomet actually means.
exactly. Yeah. Okay. And with the bands that you've had joined you? I know it's only been
Mm,
sort of several months, but have you had any
mm.
sort of like little moments of, oh, I'm really happy for them? Any sort of like little success stories already?
Uh, I would not claim that the success stories are due to the fact that we're involved in any way,
Yeah,
but it is particularly nice when you see um, a band that you've personally been a fan of for quite a long time agree to participate, or you see a band have a massive amount of success in a short time, or like for example, the UK sort of post-atmospheric black band Dawn Treader recently released their debut album, and the first pressing of it has already sold out. Things like that are really, we had nothing to do with that, nothing at all, but it's nice to see.
yeah,
And another Satan Not Hating participant, the Deprivation Fest, which are their festival is actually ongoing this weekend, which is based in Swindon. It's their inaugural festival, and it's gone really well, and they've sold out. And that again is it's just such a nice thing to sort of like be a little bit of a part of.
yeah. I can fully appreciate that. Okay.
Mm,
And in terms of coming back to, say, the fascism side of thing, and obviously
mm,
that being the main thing that you want to combat, me too as
mm,
well in what I do.
mm,
Um, so where, sorry, I've mentioned to you before we started this interview, but I'm Norse pagan, so I see a lot of similarities in the fact that
yeah.
you see the symbols being used of Norse
Mm,
paganism for fascism. You
mm,
see in industrial music, industrial clubs, you see small, subtle hints which sometimes become a bit more and
yes.
more obvious. Um, so, for instance,
Yeah.
people who've followed me a while will know that a lot of the German bands I've spoken to, when I've asked them what's the biggest problem in the scene, they've often said, "The right wing's getting a bit loud, and we don't like that anymore." Um,
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
uh, for instance, there's a very well-known band. I won't name them, but if so, you know your industrial music, which I assume you do, you'll probably know straight away. But one very famous German industrial band who has no problem with the imagery of the uniforms that they and their fans
Yep.
wear.
Yep.
And
Yep. I know exactly who you mean.
yes, and I think several years ago I interviewed them, and I was the first person to get them to say, "Yeah, we don't actually support. It's just a uniform fetish."
Mm,
And at
mm,
first I took that as, all right, fair enough.
mm,
I'll believe you. But then
mm.
again, this is another one where I was never shared. The work was never shared ever.
Right.
So, but now you see it more. So several years later, these uniforms are becoming more prevalent. They're
Yeah.
becoming more bolsterous with it. The fans are becoming more bolsterous. And
Yeah.
so I think my point is really, how do you sort of go about focusing on deciding which bands are safe? Um,
Mm.
if there's any, if there's ever a problem that comes up with a band later on, do you have sort of like a framework as how to you would deal with that?
Yeah. We've well, I'll answer your first question first. There are a few online resources you can use. I mean, first and foremost is one's own familiarity with the particular artist in question. Um, you're familiar with the lyrics, you're
Yes.
familiar with the symbols that they might use on their album covers, that kind of thing. And if you see an artist, think, "Gosh, that's that's a lot of black suns you've got on your album cover," or
Yes.
"Wow, those symbols look suspiciously like swastikas," then obviously there's an issue. Um, but there are online resources you can use. For example, there is a Facebook group called "Is It Fash the Musical," um, and it's a private group, so you have to apply to join it. But there's several thousand people in that group, and what you can do is search it for artists. Um, and if there's been problems with them in the past, they're usually there. If there's nothing and you want to double check, you can ask the group. And the advantage of that group is there's a lot of musicians in it. There's a lot of technicians in it. There's a lot of promoters in it. and a lot of studio engineers in it. So, and everything, if someone says, yeah, they're awful, but can't back it up with actual evidence, then it's dismissed. There has to be actual evidence for, in order for it to be taken literally.
And I think you've mentioned
Um,
one of, sorry, just
so,
quickly, you've mentioned
sorry, go on.
you've mentioned an unsung hero there in that group actually. Like roadies and techs, they're often kind of ignored by the bands
Mm,
unless they're being spoken to, but they hear and see everything. So they're the ones to listen to if the
everything.
band's,
Yeah,
yeah, if the band's good or not.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, they are an absolutely invaluable source of information. Because, like you say, I mean, they are there all the time. And when the artist might, have a few too many glasses of wine or beer or whatever, and their mouth starts to slip a little bit, the roadies are still there to hear it all.
Yeah.
Um, but yes, the group does kind of like insist on there being some kind of evidence that somebody has said or done something a bit dodgy. Uh, so, uh, so that's one resource. And I'm sorry, I've forgotten the other question. The second
Yeah.
question you asked
The
me.
other part was if a band does stray too far into obviously
Right.
the
Yeah. Yeah.
undesirable, how would you deal with that?
Um, the first thing we do is check it out. So we have had to remove five artists from the campaign so far that we thought were okay,
Yeah.
and we double checked, and we thought we'd caught any uh, any potential issue, and there weren't any. And then people have been good enough to contact us and say, "Hey, you might want to check this out," or we've come across something and thought, "Oh shit, that's not good," and then removed them. And when I say people have been good enough to contact us, um, there is a tendency these days for people to just hop on straight on social media and say, "Oh my God, this campaign is awful. Look, they have this, that, and the other band listed, and they're bad people." So we were very glad that these people came to us first and trusted us enough to know that we would remove them.
Yes.
Um, and we wouldn't try and sort of like defend them or anything like that. If they've done something shit, then they will be removed.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I had a similar thing myself recently. I'd done an interview with a band who I got along really well with. Saw a
Mm.
couple of like small red flags myself over the weekend. Was like, okay. As I posted the interview video, lots of women came forward and went, actually, please
Oh
take him
no.
down. Yeah, please take him down. So, yeah, I can
Oh, that's
appreciate.
bad.
Yeah, so I can appreciate that in the kind of organizations we're in and what we do, it's really hard to vet every single person, but
It's
it's
impossible to vet
yeah,
everybody and know everything about their lives, up front. You can do all the research in the world, and we do a lot. Um, but you can still miss things. It's easy. It's so easily done. But it's to anyone sort of like listening to this, it's 9 times out of 10, it is better to contact the person doing the organising
yes,
because they will listen to you. And if they don't listen to you, then they're part of the problem.
yeah, exactly. And so where the campaign focuses really heavily on being safe places for you to
Mm,
attend, or at least the idea behind the campaign. I know you're not the like event organizer necessarily. That's pretty
mm,
much down to other people, like the
mm.
organizations who joined you. Um, so I wrote this question kind of before I sort of understood this, having this conversation with you. But if in
Okay.
future, if in future, say for instance, um, your campaign did put on events or like
Mm,
one-nighters or festivals, or if you just like heavily, say, yeah, we sponsor this event, we trust it.
mm.
How would you expect to, or the staff on site, whoever they may be, or even the bands themselves who are part of your sort of campaign, how would you expect them to deal with three things? So, sorry, this is a three-part question. I'm awful for asking these. So, firstly, how could you ensure, or would you like to see organizations ensure, especially in countries like America, how you
Yeah.
advertise this as a safe place for LGBTQ plus, etc.
Mm,
That kind of paints a big flag target on that event then. So firstly, how do you expect
yeah.
organizations to keep the people safe there?
Yeah.
Secondly, I suppose it's not a three part, it's really a second part. The second part is whether someone in the audience is very obviously part of the right wing and just happens to be
Yeah,
there and they're making themselves be
yeah.
known, or if they're
Mm,
incredibly subtle about it and trying to get away with it. How would you
mm,
expect organizations or even just general people or the bands to sort
mm.
of deal with that in an admirable way?
Um, well, to answer the second one first, I would hope that if this was happening while the artist was playing, I would hope they would call it out.
Yes.
Um, uh, but again, you can't expect an artist to see or hear the actions of one or a small group of individuals, so maybe that's not possible. Um, in the second instance, I would hope that people would feel comfortable going to the someone who was on duty at the venue and saying to them, look, this person or these people are being objectionable and here's why. Can you do something about it? And I would hope that the venue would do something about it.
Yes.
To answer the first question, the first part of your question, how would we vet that? I think um, in America, I would have to defer to my American colleagues on that because obviously they would have a lot more local knowledge than I could possibly have.
Yeah.
But we would. It's not happened yet. I mean, it's without kind of like mentioning spoilers. This is a distinct possibility that something like this might happen. By which I'm talking about Satan Not Hatin related events.
Yeah.
Um, so we would certainly, depending on where in the world they were happening, we would have to draw up some kind of guidelines for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
But again, I mean, like your example particularly mentioned America, so I would defer to my American comrades on in that respect.
yeah, I mean, America's a very obvious one, being such
Mm,
a free
yeah,
country, shall we say, for
yeah,
people to attack who they want. Um,
yes, yeah,
but I'm glad your answer is very much like just go up and tell staff, because I was a doorman for
mm,
many years, and we do
mm,
see we do listen. Like a lot of people think doormen are just dickheads, and there are a lot of them, but a lot of us will be like, oh, okay, and we don't even need proof. Like,
mm,
for instance, a venue that Satanic Flea Market is at, which you mentioned, Elektro, which I
mm,
frequent often. Um, I remember one particular time, a friend of mine, she's about 4 foot nothing. She just disappeared. Like, didn't know where she went. Came back 2 seconds later with like three bouncers. Told them that someone had grabbed their butt, and they basically grabbed him and threw him straight out the fire door. So
good, fantastic. That's
yeah.
how it should be. Yeah,
So yeah, advice to people listening: if you see something, say it,
tell
because it
people. Yeah,
even if the bouncer
yeah,
doesn't chuck them out, they will keep an eye on them for the rest of the night, and it could save someone else getting, into a fight or
mm,
something. I've seen
mm.
fascists start fights at Cradle of Filth concerts just for no reason. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
stop
I
them
think we've
before it
all seen.
starts.
Yeah, I mean the other thing as well is try and go as part of a group, and at the very least, you can either choose to remove yourself as part of a group, and sort of shield the person who's being targeted. Um, it just annoys me, and it's shit that we have to take these kind of considerations into account, really.
Yeah,
And that's part of the reason we wanted to do this, just to try and show venues, try and show labels that there is a massive audience for booking bands that are non-problematic in venues that are non-problematic and doing something about the dicks that show up.
exactly. And I feel like on the other aspect of this is going to be quite educational for a lot of them, specific,
Mm.
because they'll realize that rather than just shouting, "Oh, woke culture this, woke culture that,"
Ugh.
they'll actually be like, "Well, the bands I want to see are only at venues that accept people, so I'm gonna have
Mm.
to maybe spend more time around those kind of people." And even if at first they don't enjoy it, they're gonna eventually start to becoming friends with these people, see that they are just lovely, wonderful people, and it
Yeah.
does change them. Um,
Yeah, this
so
is the thing. I think
yeah,
these people have lost the ability to see other people as people,
yeah,
human beings, rather than targets for their stupidity and their, you know, if somebody, the minute that someone uses the word woke, I kind of dismiss them.
yes, same.
It's like, okay, if that's the level you're going for, then, fuck off, basically. I'm like, sorry,
No, it's
I'll
fine.
try
It's
and
fine.
rein in my.
No,
um,
it's true. Anytime someone says the word woke, my eyes cannot roll back far enough into my head.
yeah,
So,
absolutely. Yeah.
with the Not Hating campaign, then what would you like to see the campaign have achieved, or where would you like to see it sort of be in, say, like a decade's time?
A decade. Wow.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know, to be honest. I mean, I guess the most desirable end goal is that there is no more art that is leans into fascism, but that might be a bit too of a lofty goal, really. Being people being people. Uh, I think when we launched, our initial aim was just to say, look, this is not good and we are going to stand against it. One of our roles as Satanists is to be adversaries to things. And that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to make it known that there was adversaries to this creeping right-wing extremism that was infiltrating the various scenes. Um, I think what we'd like is that it becomes much more difficult for people who hold those particular views to become popular, basically. I think that's really a realistic. I guess it would be nice for them to know that there are people out there who are watching and taking note of what they say, and that there are going to be consequences for the things that they say.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. I've personally know a few promoters already who don't hire certain bands again, or
Hmm.
won't
Yeah,
promote them in any way. So I think hate in any
yeah,
form is
yeah,
just
absolutely.
not
No, I
acceptable.
completely agree. Yeah, I mean, we sort of like explicitly mentioned right wing extremism, but we also, all the artists who participate and organizations and venues as well, um, they all know that extends to things, the more, I don't want to use the word basic, but things like racism, transphobia, homophobia, misogyny,
Yes.
in isolated cases, as well as the more full blown generalized right wing extremism slash fascism.
Yeah, because it's very subversive. I noticed when I was a teenager growing up, like I was in the metal scene. I thought the metal scene at the time was like lovely, friendly.
Mm,
But looking back now, it was like, oh, there was a lot of jokes about racism and people being gay
yeah,
and all sorts of things that you look back and you go, oh, that was
yes,
not right. So it's good to
yeah,
try
yeah,
and find people who are against that.
yeah. I mean, my experience is the same as yours. Um, you, I mean, at my age, I was a teenager in the 80s, so there was obviously no internet. So you were kind of like dependent on magazine interviews and tape trading and things like that. Um, and so you would be a massive fan of a particular band, and I'm not going to name names. And then, a couple of months later, an interview would come out in, I don't know, Kerrang or Metal Hammer or whatever, and this particular artist would say something, and you think, oh shit!
Yeah,
Turns out they're a massive dick. And I've just spent a fiver in the 80s on their latest album, or I've just bought gig tickets for them also, and it's that kind of thing that we really want to challenge. Really, people can come to our website and they can see a whole bunch of artists and venues and labels that they can be safe, going to see or spending money on music by them.
yeah. It's kind of like a vetting process, isn't it? Gives you a bit of peace of mind.
Yes, yeah, exactly. I mean, nobody wants to sort of spring a tenner on an album and then find out that the band are all a bunch of massive racists,
Yes.
or espouse rampant transphobia or something like that. Um, so hopefully, if we do nothing else, we've provided a list of good quality bands who don't hold those views, and it's okay to sort of splurge a tenner on an album by them, or go, buy gig tickets, and knowing that you're not going to be exposed to a 10-minute rant on woke snowflakes by the lead singer partway through the gig.
Yes, yes. There was particular artist who came out recently. He said some very transphobic stuff that the entire community was shocked at what they said, absolutely shocked. And then
Yeah.
rather than just going, yeah, I fucked up, or sorry, but I hold those views and I'm not going to change them.
Mm.
Instead, he turned around and released an album that was just calling out like woke is overrated and all of this kind of stuff. And it's like, dude, why would you do that to your
Yeah.
friends? Like, stop it.
Well, yeah, and even if they're not your friends, just human beings,
Yeah,
why would you do it?
yeah. Why
I mean,
would you?
why are people so consumed by what other people are that they feel the need to devote? Oh, I don't know. It's just beyond me. I genuinely don't understand it.
Yeah, I mean, we've all seen the hate in other forms as well. So not just
Yeah.
necessarily obvious fascism, but things like the Olympics and a certain very famous
Mm.
author saying things about a woman who she was usually saying she would defend, and now she's attacking other women. So yeah,
The,
it's bizarre the roads they take, isn't it?
yeah, I mean, the Olympics was just, I mean, it became kind of like, I don't know, a hate fest for a certain type of person. First of all, they had that absolute bullshit. Oh, they're attacking Christianity. Well, it
Yes,
wasn't anything. It
that's
wasn't even a
Hellenic.
Christian. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy's blue. Doesn't that give you a clue that it might not be about Christianity? Oh dear.
Yes, it is madness.
And then Gajira happened to do a fucking awesome set, by the way, and that got attacked as satanic, and then there was the whole thing, yes, with that particular Scottish wizard lady.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and suddenly this kind of like celebration of athleticism and human achievement becomes this shitfest.
Yeah, I think that's what all forms of hatred and fascism come down to, isn't it? Turning everything that's wonderful and good into something that's just shit for no reason.
Yes. Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
okay. Right, well, last couple of questions then. So, is it with the Satan Not Hating campaign, how many
Mm.
of you are there? Is it just yourself? Do you have a team? What's that looking like?
It's a small team. Um, as I said earlier, it started off just UK, um, and that was me and a couple of other people. And then it kind of, as the other orders became involved, I would say there is roughly 5 or 6 of us.
Hmm, it's good.
Yeah,
Good amount. I
and
know.
some other
Oh,
and some other people kind of like dip in and out. If there's particular jobs that need doing that require a particular skill set that none of us have that they do.
yeah, I know how much work goes into this kind of thing, so it's good to have sort of more than one
Yeah,
person, definitely. Okay.
yeah.
And obviously you've mentioned the ways that the campaign's trying to help and the way it's trying to be out there for people. But is there any other ways you'd like to sort of help or further the campaign in the future that you haven't quite got around to yet, do you think?
We've got a few irons in our infernal fire, but nothing concrete just yet. Certainly nothing I want to kind of like commit to
Yeah.
in an interview. But yes, we are aware that the campaign's got a certain amount of momentum at the moment. Um, we would like to get more exposure through things like this, interviews and media stuff. Um, but yes, in terms of taking the campaign itself forward, we do have a few things that we want to do. Um, but we are also kind of like, you know, we're also people who have lives, jobs, etc. So there's only a certain amount of time that we can dedicate to it each day.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So it's you know, we kind of like we have a rough plan which kind of like solidifies as each objective gets ticked off our list, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it certainly does. Yeah.
Mm.
And the last thing I just wanted to ask then was, I mean, it seems obvious to you and I, where I've been on the website and so you run it, but how would people go about joining you, signing up, and what kind of what kind of things would you like to see? Say, for instance, if you got like a lot of black metal bands, for instance, what other
Mm.
kind of things would you like to see an upkick of?
Well, we've got, as you say, we've got an awful lot of metal bands, and that's great. Um, we've got a couple of industrial bands too. Convulsing are on, for example. Um, we've also just started approaching some kind of like neo folk, dark folk type artists. Um, and we've got a couple of funk bands involved, but we'd like to see more of that. Um, and really, I think that the one kind of like area that we haven't really touched on too much that we do want to kind of look more at is the sort of goth and indie bands. Really, I think those are the main ones that we want to target after. Oh, target's a bad word. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
Um, um, those are the next sort of like group of artists that we want to approach.
Yeah. So just so that they can be seen as to be like, yeah, they're safe. Don't have to worry,
Mm.
as you said. Like you're not going to find out a year later that they're dicks, kind of thing. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So
In terms of people becoming involved with us, we kind of have a two-stage. So again, I'll go back to this idea that I touched on earlier that each order is autonomous. So each order has its own methods of kind of like people joining. Uh, for example, uh, GOS Steel City, which is our Pittsburgh order, um, you kind of become a member through joining their Discord server. For UK, it's a bit more formalised than that. You can fill in a form on the website. Um, that's then vetted, and if we think you're a pretty good person, we'll contact you and have an audio interview. And then we say yes or no, depending on how that interview goes. Um, the other way that people can get involved is join the international Discord server, which is on the address for that is on our website, and that allows people to join as what we call at a contributor level. So that basically means they're not a formal member of the order, but they're kind of like interested in finding out what Satanism is, what it might be about, whether it's for them, whether we're the right satanic organization for them, because there are others, um, and you know whether they want to be part of a community at all, because you don't have to be part of a community to be a Satanist. You know, it's something you can do perfectly well on your own. So yeah, we've got a number of ways that people can participate if they want to.
yeah, okay. Well, that's all been really quite insightful, actually. A lot more insightful
Cool.
than I sort of realized it would be. So I really appreciate you giving me your
No
time,
worries.
Laraje, to
That's
tell me
okay.
all about it. So yeah,
Not
thank
a
you.
problem.
So yeah, thank you very
That's
much
okay. Yeah.
for joining me.
I
And
very much enjoyed it, and thanks very much for letting me talk about Satan Not Hatin for most of your Sunday afternoon.
thank you everyone for listening.